the most valuable thing for a startup member at Greentown is getting a partnership, a pilot partnership with one of our partners or other members of the ecosystem. The pilot is what transforms the company from being a technology project to something with a commercial inflection, and allows customers to reference something successful. And securing those pilots is a lot of work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CleanTechies Podcast. This is episode 53 of the show. I am your host, Silas Maynor. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to bring the show to you, and I'm very, very thankful to you for tuning in today. Before we get into today's episode, into the details, our ask of you is to please be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us know any questions that you do have that you'd like us to ask in future episodes. And of course, we also want to highlight our offering to you. If you are a founder with specific needs or anything, we're very glad to make any introductions that we can, as we encounter a lot of people in the space through doing the show. This could be introductions to capital, potential partnership opportunities, maybe marketing needs, or specific talent. Definitely, generally, speaking, if there's any way we can help, please do reach out. Always glad to be of help in any way we can, as that is our entire goal with this venture. So with that, let's get into the details of today's show. Today's episode is with Jason Ethier, the Senior Director of Membership at Greentown Labs. If you're not familiar with Greentown is an in-person CleanTech incubator. They have locations in Boston and Houston. And in this episode, the main things we discussed are what Greentown is doing to help CleanTech startups get off the ground, how their program works, how partnerships are playing a role in the CleanTech community. We discussed talent, and then the final major item was the relationship between Houston's old energy past and the new energy future, which I thought was quite fascinating myself. But as always, before we get into the show, we of course want to make special thanks to our sponsors, NextWave Partners. NextWave are experts in talent acquisition, recruitment, and retention across the ClimateTech, Renewables, ESG, and technology spaces globally. So if your team is growing, or perhaps you are looking to make a career change yourself, definitely consider reaching out to NextWave. You can do that a couple different ways. You can reach out to through their website at next-wavepartners.com, or you can reach out to one of their consultants directly via their LinkedIn page, and they can kind of connect with you and understand what your needs are and what you're looking for, and then go from there. But yeah, thank you again so much for joining, and without any further delay, let's get into the show.
All right, welcome to the show, Jason. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm fine as frog hair, enjoying the heat of New York and the humidity. I know we talked about this before the show, but it sounds like it's hot in Texas too, as usual.
Yeah.
But anyways, I guess let's just start off by, you want to give us a quick introduction to who you are, how did you end up doing what you're doing, just kind of the quick backstory.
Yeah, no, my name's Jason Ethier, here at Greentown Labs. I started in the climate tech industry right after college, was really looking at a variety of opportunities and realized I wanted to be part of a startup, and kind of backed into climate tech. Didn't really think about it, wasn't deliberate, was really interested in working on technical challenges that were fun. And I think that's kind of a universal story for a lot of entrepreneurs. They are just very interested in a problem. And it also has a certain kind of hubris to it, that you think you can go out and solve a problem and no one else has. And that's a pretty common, I think, behavior for people who get started. And now that I'm more experienced in it, I'm thinking, okay, this is the right place to be. It's the right time. And there are a lot of dynamics that say ClimateTech is where I want to be. And so I'm at Greentown now. Greentown is a ClimateTech incubator. We support getting the best world-class startups into our space to help them really take off their businesses, help them really get going. And we really look to help those companies with big climate impact, big investability, and we really want to build that strong ecosystem that will support them. So glad to be here kind of in the ecosystem.
So tell me about what was kind of the impetus? You said that you kind of accidentally found ClimateTech. What was the series of events that led you ultimately to be in this space?
Yeah, no, frankly, I was looking for a career path that I wanted to pursue right out of college. And a lot of the options for me were traditional engineering. It was looking at working in places in the Rust Belt that I frankly wasn't as interested in working in, and had an opportunity to work on a technology that was trying to build really small engine systems for cell phones, of all things, to provide power that was better than a battery. And as we got into the market research and the trends are taking shape in the marketplace, it became evident that battery technology was getting really good, and the engine technology we were trying to commercialize just didn't have product market fit. But that threw me into the energy world, and when we decided to wind down that startup, I immediately went into another startup, again working in energy but tackling a different market where it seemed like there would be better product market fit. And it was a path of discovery. We launched this company in 2012, which was sort of a dark era for ClimateTech because the investment returns in that space just weren't great. There was not a lot of capital flowing into the space. There wasn't the same need for climate tech companies that we're seeing today. And really saw everything, did every accelerator, did every prize that we could get into in the Boston ecosystem to try and raise the capital to build this business. And ultimately, through mentoring, through coaching, we were able to raise an SBIR grant funded by the NSF. And from there, we're able to build a business, but had challenges when we entered the market and developed a lot of learning experiences there where I hope no one else has to go through them, but I know our founders will experience and go through similar challenges. And am able to help identify how to support businesses here and hopefully sidestep some of those challenges we experienced.
Interesting. Yeah, I always find it fascinating the people's stories getting into the space because there's so many different paths that have led to the area, and it's always interesting to hear. So that's great. Why don't we talk about could you give us an in detail rundown of what is Greentown Labs and how does it work? Who do you work with? What are the outcomes? Just kind of give us a big lowdown on it.
Yeah, so Greentown Labs is the largest climate tech incubator in the country. We might say the planet, but it's sometimes hard to know what's going on in other ecosystems. We really work to build an inclusive community that convenes, connects, and inspires entrepreneurs. And then we're also trying to do that for the ecosystem that they're working in, with a specific focus on advancing climate solutions. That's a big mission, but when we try to get down to specific industries, we're really focusing on agriculture, building technologies, manufacturing, resilience and adaptation, transportation, and energy or climate tech. I'll be honest, energy is about half of our companies at Greentown today. And it's in some ways a holdover from the climate tech industries we've always supported. We expanded our mission to take into account that there are a lot of ways where you can reduce carbon footprint or improve resilience in the global economy. And so those are the sectors we like to focus on. Greentown also likes to engage with anybody, frankly, from early stage companies to larger partners, non-government organizations, governments. If there's somebody who wants to get involved in Greentown, there is a way to do so. And a lot of the programs we engage in are to help put eyeballs and put resources in front of our entrepreneurs to help them be successful. And it's just a matter of how we can kind of create the most mechanical leverage for our companies. Again, it's about helping those founders be really successful.
So typically, at what stage do people enter the program or enter the accelerator?
Yeah, so and I would say we consider ourselves an incubator. It's a little different from an accelerator in terms of the program itself is something people engage in kind of as they need it. Whereas I would say an accelerator is one that is fixed in time, usually has a demo day at the end. But honestly, the nomenclature shifts so much in this industry, and we are an incubator with accelerator-like characteristics. So I'm happy to kind of get into details about what we do. Greentown specifically likes to work with founders who are at the early stage of company development. They usually already have a company. They must already have a company to come into Greentown. Usually it's 2 to 4 people. Usually they've raised some outside capital around $200,000. And then we like to work with them throughout the rest of their commercialization cycle. Companies will tend to have a lot of employees at Greentown while they are under 8 to 10 people and before they've raised $8 million. And what often happens is a company will grow up, it will raise the capital it needs to grow, and then the CEO will stay a member of Greentown because they love the community, they love staying plugged in with other founders, and frankly, they love giving back and teaching other founders how they built their business, how they raise capital, things like that.
Mhm. When people, you said at the enter, typically 2 to 4 people in the company, what would you say do a lot of these people look like? Is it a lot of, well, what's the combination? Is it commercial plus some science-based? Is it, do they have certain challenges that they face? I'd be kind of keen to understand, like, what is a typical, again, not everyone's going to be different, but what's a typical kind of entrant look like?
Yeah, the most successful companies usually have a diversity of skills on the team. So there is usually someone who's really into the technology, someone who's really into the business. It is helpful when someone gets comfortable getting up in front of investors and selling what their business does, selling the vision, selling dreams. A team that is full of scientists usually struggles because they are unable to bring in the capital they need to transition off of grants or off of friends and family. And ultimately, you got to sell customers. So a good team is 2 to 4 people, and it has that diversity of skills. Sometimes the other skill sets really depend on the industry they're in. If it's regulatory heavy, sometimes you see legal counsel getting involved early. And a lot of times when we say 2 to 4 people, that sometimes means 2 people and then 2 to 3 part-time folks who are contributing 10 hours a week. And I think the founders are very efficient with how they want to deploy their capital to make sure they have that right expertise in-house to bring their technology and their companies along along their commercial path.
And do a lot of these folks have, significant experience in a different, in their career already, or are they oftentimes really, kind of fresh out the gate of university or whatnot?
Yeah, so we actually have a bifurcation of population at Greentown. So there's probably half of Greentown founders who come in fresh out of academic programs. Usually it's a PhD or master's student who's studied a physical science, and is looking to bring that out into the world. And they build a team. So they have the other business acumen with them, but they don't necessarily have all the answers for how their new disruptive technology is going to change the world. And so they are bringing out their business to discover what that commercial plan is and secure funding, demonstrate the technology can actually go to market cost effectively, and then get it out there. And frankly, those companies become our big, meaningful, disruptive companies at Greentown. There's another type of founder who comes in who has 20 years of experience. They have deep market insight. They really understand the trends in the industry, and they have a vision for what the solution will be. And sometimes they're looking for that technical founder to help build the solution, or they're sourcing together technologies that they've licensed from someone else to, again, solve that very technical challenge. Those founders usually go through Greentown much quicker because they have a very clear vision of the solution they need to build, and they can test very quickly if someone's going to buy it. And that ends up being the 2 kind of populations we have. And we were able to serve both of them by building the same thing. We're really just building a community of like-minded folks, and the experienced entrepreneurs value having an ecosystem to be in, and the entrepreneurs coming out of academia value having people they can learn from. And so it ends up being very mutually beneficial ecosystem. And of course, on top of that, we're layering on all the other folks who are interested in ClimateTech. But at its core, it's this community of co-founders and technologists that we're bringing together.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say are some of like the main reasons why people choose to join Greentown? Like, are there specific drivers that attract the majority of folks, or is it does it vary widely?
Yeah, I think that, I'll go back to it. I think it sounds cliche, but community is really it. And when you're in a place like Greentown, where the folks are at that same stage of development, where they're learning how to bring product to market, or they're raising their first $1 million of capital, there's a camaraderie that develops, especially as you get rejected from hundreds of investors. There's this camaraderie in this community that gets formed as people build their businesses together. Like I said, the experienced entrepreneur seeks that out because they know how valuable it is to have peers and coaches and an ecosystem that supports them. And they will come just for the community. And the same can be said for these younger entrepreneurs who are coming out of academia. They are looking for an ecosystem to plug into so they can learn from the experienced mentors and peers in the space. And when they see the community in action and they feel it, it's a very compelling place to be. And that's often what people need to feel to join the ecosystem.
Mhm. And so at what point typically do people exit the program? I think you mentioned this in passing already, but when do they exit? What does the outcome typically look like, for a successful founder?
So a typical founder will come into Greentown when they have a technology. That's what we call TRL 5. This is a standard for technology readiness level. There are a variety of definitions, but we like to use 5. It means the technology works. They're looking to put it in a product, but it's not quite there yet. They tend to stay with us till TRL 8, where they've done a pilot or they've done a demonstration in an operational environment. That's a very technical definition of when a company tends to come through Greentown, but it lines up well with their funding need and their commercial development. During that time, they'll typically go from their 2 to 4 founders up to about 8 to 10 founders, and they will raise anywhere from $8 to $10 million as they make commercial progress. Usually they're exiting because they have product market fit. They found someone who likes what they've built, and they are looking to build production products, and they don't necessarily need a lab space anymore. They need a production space, and they go off and find somewhere else to be. So that's a typical pathway for a company that comes to Greentown. Another term we sometimes talk about is the commercial inflection point. A company is ready to grow out of Greentown when they've hit this point where they are starting to really just sell product because they've hit this commercial inflection, and they have enough referenceable sales in the marketplace that they're able to take off. And that's what we want to see. We really like to see them accelerate. And what it means from a practical perspective is they're able to get the capital they need to really just buy the resources that they would normally get from an incubator like Greentown. And their needs usually get sophisticated enough that the value of kind of the generalist resources we provide is frankly less than what they can afford. And to put that into practical terms, once you've raised a large amount of capital, you want the best engineering manager you can in your field. You want the best salesperson in your market. And you kind of graduated from the general things we're able to support.
Okay, so another thing I think a lot of people listening would be curious to understand is how does it work for them? Kind of, I don't know if you have standard costs or how does it work? I'm kind of curious to see the model.
So Greentown really just charges a fee. We have a base membership for joining, and there are a lot of benefits that accrue to the startup and the founders just from being a member. We have a membership fee for Boston and a membership fee for Houston, and there are different rates, and they do change a little bit for inflation. In Houston, the rate is $450 a month. If I were on my game, I would remember what the Boston rate is, but usually I reference the pricing sheet. From there, once a company is under base membership, we tend to charge fees as they increase usage. So if they want to add desks, if they want to have more people at Greentown, we love to help support them, and that's how we monetize. I would say that the majority of Greentown membership is really paid for by the partnerships we engage with, as much as membership fees. And I think it's a lot of value for money that the founders get just for being in the ecosystem. But that most value is for coming in at that base fee.
What are some of the really big partnerships that you end up offering a lot of these people? I'm sure that it kind of varies because everything's nuanced, but I'm assuming because you guys are in the market and there's a lot of these maybe legal services or whatever they are, like what are the really common partnerships that people love to be partaking in?
Yeah, so the most valuable thing for a startup member at Greentown is getting a partnership, a pilot partnership with one of our partners or other members of the ecosystem. The pilot is what transforms a company from being a technology project to something with a commercial inflection, and allows customers to reference something successful. And securing those pilots is a lot of work. The startup has to go out and sell the value and demonstrate their technology. We try to create the environment where corporate partners can come in, see the technology, understand how it can be put to use, and we help the partners see a lot of the technology trends in the space so they can make the right decision for who to pilot with. That's probably the most important thing we can do for startup. It is also one where we don't necessarily have a direct benefit where we say, look, you come to Greentown, you will get a pilot with X, Y, or Z. That's a little bit where we try to do matchmaking in the ecosystem. From a practical perspective, there are a number of other benefits we provide to our members, everything from referring them to a coach for how to pitch, how to practice your speech in a public forum, down to software packages from our partners at MATLAB and SolidWorks, things that would cost thousands of dollars if they had to go out and source it themselves. A lot of these resources are brought to bear to save our entrepreneurs time so they can identify a solution that works for an early stage company and save them dollars as they work through commercialization. And there's such a long list of them. I would do a disservice if I tried to list them all today in here. And we try to be responsive to what our members are looking for. And so a lot of times we will change up the benefit mix based on what we're hearing our members need.
Are you able to, given your network, if there's a specific need that they have, kind of go and hunt that down, what they're looking for, given you probably have a lot of people who are just very motivated to help this space that are willing to pour in their networks as well?
Yeah, so one of the resources that practically members and founders are looking for is understanding valuations in our space, understanding the capital that is being deployed. And so the number one question is, do you have a resource like PitchBook or Crunchbase who can help me evaluate a financing that I'm working on right now? And we are actively talking to both those companies about what we can do to bring them in to support our startups. And we want to turn around and say, look, that's a benefit for our startups to tap into so they can understand how they should be negotiating. There are other resources that just commonly come up where someone says, I have a pain point, and then we try to identify service providers who will support them. One of the earliest pain points that our founders always talk about is having good legal counsel. And so we've identified legal counsel in Boston for general corporate legal support and IP support, and we have a separate legal counsel in Houston. And good legal counsel is worth its weight in gold, especially when you get to those stages of negotiating an investment. You want to have someone by your side who's really done a lot of investment deals before and can speak to whether investment terms coming from the counterparty, the investor, are market good or bad based on the other investments they're working on. And so that ends up being tremendously valuable for our members, and it creates a source of revenue for our legal counsel partners. And they're really great. I love working with the two groups we work with. Here in Houston, we work with Benson and Elkins, and in Boston, we are working with Foley Hogue.
I'm kind of interested in this, how you guys have this structured, because it seems like the incentive structure is pretty interesting. It's well aligned, where I've seen that it sometimes feels, you hear some of these stories in just, I guess, the general technology space, the VC space, and how companies are forced to do things that are, just not necessarily commercially the best thing, but it's about, spending the money so that we can get the customers, so we can get more money next time. How has this played out, kind of the difference maybe between what you're doing in the ClimateTech space versus the contrast of perhaps what you're familiar with to what extent you are in the traditional VC space, and how your positioning allows you to make sure that you're not kind of pushing these founders to do anything that doesn't actually make sense for them, and that you're aligned because you're just taking a standard fee rather than pushing them to sell too early or whatnot. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, so one of the things that I think makes Greentown a little funky is we don't take equity, and we're a mission-driven organization. And because we don't necessarily take an equity stake, there isn't like a long-term view or portfolio view we are taking on maximizing value today or maximizing liquidity today. We can really put resources in front of the members and say, look, these are things that we're providing for you. You tell us what you want to use today. And you use them. And frankly, Greentown has so many resources at the disposal of a founder. One founder could not tap into all of it, which is part of the reason why we like larger teams. And there are resources that really allow the founders to tap into there are programs that allow these founders to tap into different resources as they grow their business. And frankly, an entrepreneur who's coming in with 1 to 2 people really need help with customer discovery. They need help hiring that first team, and they need to brush up skills or learn new skills around fundraising. Once a company has matured and is starting to sell more than one pilot, their focus ends up being more commercial and ends up being more around marketing, less customer discovery, and more about hiring a broader team. And so that just their needs change over time. And we try to put that programming in front of them, knowing that it's a portfolio approach of an offering, and folks will take and use what they need as they grow. And so I think there's a little bit of a difference there, where we're not kind of foisting a resource onto folks, and they're really saying, look, I need this today because this is where I'm paying attention, or honestly what my biggest pain point is as I grow my business, and as they kind of move around in their own commercial path, they're able to engage with Greentown in different ways.
I'm also interested to talk about I think, and maybe it's not been stated explicitly, but how these programs are in person. Could you kind of talk about the reasoning behind this? And then you kind of mentioned community earlier, but the reasoning behind this, and then what you found, how you found that to be. Was it challenging during COVID, and kind of what does the future look like, and what is your philosophy, generally speaking, on this in-person idea?
Yeah, so having been on the founder side before, I'll tell you, being in person is a lot more fun. And when I say it's about community and building a strong ecosystem, doing things in person allows you to have those kind of accidental conversations and friendships that don't happen over Zoom. And I think being able to do things virtually allows you to extend your reach. But the reason people come to Greentown is because they want a place to enjoy each other's company. They want to have that more casual advising session. That, like, Zoom just makes it too formal. It's just not as interesting, not as engaging. You get Zoom fatigue from being on all the time. And when you're in person in a community, you can turn it off, have a beer, have a drink, and really just talk about whatever your big, nut to crack is that week, without having to be on all the way. I think one of the other things that's challenging about Zoom, and maybe we haven't kind of figured out as a society, is the community building just isn't as strong. I do play a lot of video games. In my spare time, I do a massive multiplayer online games, and there's a casualness where a community kind of comes together online, and you're tackling certain objectives online, and those do feel organic. They do come together, and you do build kind of camaraderie in the moment. We haven't figured out how to do that in the same way in a Zoom environment, and I don't personally have the imagination yet to say how we'd do it virtually. And I enjoy that in-person aspect. The other reality is Greentown started as an in-person incubator, and so a lot of our heritage is doing things in person, building events and bringing together people physically. And that's just a core part of what Greentown is. And I think we do it very well. And moving to Zoom during the pandemic was challenging. And there were times when we were in the depth of it where it did not feel the same. It did not feel as organic and natural as we do today. And frankly, since we started coming back in the like March timeframe, it has been event after event, and it has been tiring, and it has been good. And it's something I'm very excited to continue to be part of, because you do build a strong community in person.
Do you think, I mean, again, you kind of stated that you're not necessarily feel like you're an expert on this, but do you think that there will be some kind of way that we can help solve some of this issue? Because I do agree with you from my perspective, building a team remotely, it's very, very difficult to build a culture, especially. But do you think that there will be solutions to this in the future, whether that's, the metaverse or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I was not going to touch the word metaverse because it would show how little I know about it. But there are a lot of smart people looking at this problem, because it would be tremendously valuable to kind of recreate communities virtually in a way that's different than being on Reddit or Quora. I wouldn't necessarily say Greentown would be on the front end of that. We would, I'm paying attention to it. I'm looking at it. I'm very curious what's coming around the corner. Sometimes the language stops me in my tracks around, the metaverse, but it's a good thing. And there are a lot of these programs that are coming up that didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago, that do have strong communities around them. And they've been very good at curating a community in a way that's different than what Greentown does. In many ways, we're leaning into our strengths around in person in a way where others go virtual. And I think that's a good and healthy way for the ecosystem to grow.
Mhm. Yeah, I oftentimes think about this and try to come up with ways within my team to try to kind of spur those kind of ad hoc things, right? Because sometimes it feels like, hey, this is our formal work, chat. We shouldn't be sending memes here. We shouldn't be doing this or that. But sometimes it's like maybe it's worth, teaching people how to be a little bit kind of spontaneous that can help spur these things, because there's many times where we have collaborations that come up because we used to have a daily morning meeting where we'd go over just kind of, who knows, actually, it would just be a quick meeting, but sometimes it'd be very, very valuable. So I am fascinated to see how this plays out. Obviously you see the news with like Airbnb CEO and things changing. I find it fascinating, and I kind of wonder how much collaboration might be lost potentially, and how many ideas might just kind of fall through the cracks. But I think it's very fascinating what you guys are doing. So speaking of location, talk to us about kind of what it's like in Houston. I think before I got into the energy industry, I wasn't familiar with this, but again, as I kind of learned, Houston has this kind of reputation of being a big oil and gas hub. What has it been like there? What have the local stakeholders, kind of how have they been to interact with? What do you think the future is? Just talk to us all about that.
Yeah, Houston traditionally has been oil and gas, and we like to announce that we're the energy capital of the world, and I would say that's mostly oil and gas, but it includes other types of energy. We have a lot of leadership here in Houston that I don't think we necessarily tout to the rest of the world. Very strong, of course, petrochemicals industry. We did lead with a deregulated grid. Does have challenges from a management standpoint. But at the same time, it creates a playground for technology companies to come in, deploy new technologies, look at things like energy storage. And I think there's also a lot of other leadership in terms of big project finance. Big wind projects get financed here, big solar projects get financed here. I think I read, solar from a project development standpoint, we're one of the top 5 in the country. And then wind out in West Texas has been huge for several years. And I think one of the things that we understand very well in Houston is just project finance, doing big projects. And one of the things that really changed over the last year is solar projects became competitive, if not profitable, against traditional energy. And everyone's been looking at it and waiting, and it looks like the data said it's happening now. And so, money talks in that sense. People understand smart projects. They understand how to include things like the ITC credits to say, look, these are good projects, irrespective of if it's traditional energy or new energy, and capital is being deployed appropriately to fund these big and good projects. And I think that's like a hidden superpower in Houston. The industry here is very good at deploying capital against oil and gas projects, be it big offshore fields or shorter, smaller, quicker shale development projects. And when they look at these energy programs coming to market, they say, you can do the discounted cash flow and say, look, this is going to make money. And Houston is very good at deploying capital in that way. I think the thing that's unique about Houston is, well, any city is proud of its heritage, but Houston is very proud of being the energy capital of the world. I think we want to continue to be that energy capital, irrespective of where that energy comes from. And if the energy transition is going to happen, it's going to be here, because we have smart people working on it, and they want to keep it here at home. I think one of the interesting analogies to kind of point to is as we go through this energy transition, there is going to be a massive deployment of capital where we change a lot of infrastructure, and there are a lot of smart people working on it. And you can look at a variety of industries and say, look, in a disrupted industry, you have new market players who come in and replace the old market players. But you have some industries that are very capital intensive, like the telecom industry, where you look at it and say, okay, new technologies did come up. We have the internet, we have 5G. who are the companies deploying that? Turns out it's a lot of the same companies who deployed the original telecom networks. It's the baby bells, AT&T, Verizon, and then you have these big conglomerates like Cox Cable and others. They are companies that have been around for 50, 60 more years. They are very good at deploying capital to implement that new infrastructure. And the energy transition has a lot of characteristics where you're going to continue to see these big energy companies effectively deploy energy projects to provide more energy to their downstream customers. And the fact that Houston is already an energy capital means we got to lean into it and really bring these new technology companies to market so that the capital can be deployed, the talent can be here. And I think Houstonians really believe in it and want to retain that leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's quite fascinating. I think it was quite a while ago, but I one time stumbled into a clubhouse room that was I think it was mostly oil and gas folks kind of ripping on renewables people, saying like how they're just, they're not listening to us, they're not, they're very delusional with these things. And I oftentimes feel that there seems to be this kind of division between people, when I also agree with you that some of the best companies are the ones, or the companies that do the best things are the ones that have the capital to deploy, and they shift their strategy, right? It's just a matter of will they do it, accurately and transparently, which I think we're seeing, generally speaking, especially with the ESG push. So that's interesting.
And I think there's something that's different this time around too. So besides the fact that these projects are starting to be profitable and are profitable, customers demand climate tech solutions today in a way that's just different than before, right? And that mandate is showing up in government. It is showing up in policy, like we see it in Europe. And on top of that, employees are demanding their companies participate in more climate tech oriented or climate friendly activities. And the reality is, if a company doesn't support that need of their employees will go elsewhere. They will go work at other companies. And when you have a dynamic where the traditional energy industry is seeing a changing of the guard, where the expertise is retiring, the baby boomer generation is retiring, you got to maintain and support the millennial workforce. And if they demand to work at a place that is more climate friendly, and you choose not to do it, they can go anywhere else because of the new world we live in. And so I think that's driving some of the shift as well, for people to really take seriously climate. So you get this like three effects. It's just customer demand, equities and investors are demanding energy investments, and it is profitable. And then employees really want to work at a place that meets and aligns with their goals. And that's creating just a different environment from where we were 10 years ago. And it's going to fuel climate investment for years to come.
Yeah, that's definitely, I've noticed the exact same thing within recruitment space, is that a lot of people, they do not, they're like, hey, I really care about what they're doing as a company. Are they environmentally friendly, and are they serious about it? So that's, you're right. The best talent is going to the places that are ahead of the curve there. What have been some of the challenges that you've seen working with maybe these kind of the old guard, if you will, the old school energy folks? Have there been any kind of difficulties on the technology side, and maybe when you're talking kind of pairing the energy with the more climate technology and kind of getting these two things that are, usually in different worlds, getting them to work together? What have been some of those challenges?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I have to admire about the legacy oil and gas industry is it's a very technical industry, and the folks making and recommending new technologies for deployment understand the challenges really well. Like you get these experts who understand downhole well, geology and what changes in a drilling program can do to affect yields. And they are getting together at conferences where they talk about the different strategies they implement, the different technologies they use. And so when a technology works, it just kind of percolates out to the industry, and everyone takes note and everyone is aware. There's always a debate on when the right time is to deploy new technology, but it gets deployed quickly. And I think the challenge is oil and gas was very sophisticated with how it looked at technology. But when you have something in climate tech where there's a variety of value chains to look at, it can be challenging to understand how to translate a skill set from something very oil and gas technical to technical review in solar or wind or in hydro or in battery technologies. And jargon aside, technology aside, there are a lot of these same core principles that smart technical professionals can look at. Does it generate a return? Is there technical risk? There are a lot of these processes that could translate. And I think the fear of something that's different sometimes holds up a project or holds up technical review. But I also think like the folks who do work on technology adoption do have the tools at hand and are starting to think about how do we bring new technologies into the fold. One of the I think biggest challenges for these folks is the technology review is very much based on kind of known technology, but procurement also tends to be very sophisticated. And procurement of new technology is fundamentally different from procurement of legacy technology. Usually when someone is thinking about procurement, they think about things like, is the vendor qualified? Do they have good credit? What's their history of delivering high quality product? When you're talking about new technology, those requirements kind of go out the window because the things you are testing are different and the risks are different. And a lot of times the question you're asking with a new pilot is, does it work? And do I see a pathway for it to save me money? Pilots rarely save money the first time because there's so much overhead attached to the project. They need to develop a lot of these processes to reduce costs or make it profitable. That acumen exists in industry today. We've just developed so many standards around them that you haven't had to like open up and back out and say, okay, how would I actually redesign my procurement processes to take into account a fundamentally new type of technology? And sometimes we get organizations bumping up against the desire of a technologist. They want to deploy new technology, but sometimes they run into procurement challenges because a startup just isn't going to pass the litmus test that is traditionally applied. The awareness of these challenges is something that our partners are aware of and are starting to address internally. And that's a role Greentown plays is educating the various stakeholders on the right way to think about new technologies and how to adopt them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this idea of education and bringing people from the old guard to the new is very interesting, because what I've noticed in recruitment is that the companies want, like you said, they want the absolute best. So they're going to go try to find, of 15 people in the market that can do that job who've done it directly. They want that person. As a result, you get massively inflated salaries. Maybe it's good for some people, but then you're also leaving a bunch of people who are capable of being upskilled in the dust. And I'm curious if you have seen a lot of, maybe in particular with Houston, have you seen a lot of these startups being willing to hire people from the traditional energy side of things, especially when it comes to energy, hire people from, adjacent industries with similar skill sets? And how do they handle that? Do they have partners that they work with to help educate them, or do they do the in-house kind of upskilling? I'm really keen to hear what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think there are three things that founders talk about when they need help. It's funding, it's customer discovery, and then it's hiring great people. And honestly, the last one is hard because every company needs a different skill set. The CEO is constantly thinking about the team they're building that'll help them be successful. And the founders we work with have challenges where sometimes they get too many resumes and they get too many people interested in what they're working in, and they don't have a good strategy to filter down to the best or the best one for their team. We also have the opposite challenge where some founders want something super specific and they don't know how to find that partner for their team. This is usually a company that's going from 3 people to 4 people. I think there's a lot of openness in this industry for reskilling, for working with that right partner, founding employee who has a lot of gumption and is willing to take a little risk on future salary versus someone who has a lot of experience and can cruise at another business. And what I mean by that, by future salary, is I think that a lot of founders understand and appreciate they got to pay market for somebody. Like there is a value that an employee can demand. The risk an early employee takes on is, will the company be here in 2 years? Will the company be able to raise that next round of capital? And I challenge you to find a CEO who can look you straight in the eye and say, yes, we will have money in 36 months. You raise money in 2 to 3 year increments. And I think the bet an employee is putting on themselves is they can add to the team to demonstrably increase value of the company, increase value of the team, so that you can hit those technical milestones or those business milestones and help raise that next round of capital. And when a founding employee bets on themselves and bets on reskilling themselves, they can put a lot of those practical experiences together, even if they don't necessarily have as much domain experience as other folks in the industry.
Mm-hmm. In terms of I guess equity and maybe kind of inclusion, have you seen any new models for employee packages to help them, to help maybe not the first few employees, but maybe, the next 10 to 15? Have you seen any interesting ways that companies are structuring their equity packages to allow for kind of a more distributed ownership of the company? Have you seen anything like this, the creative models that are trying to help create a world where these people maybe are passionate about a project and they're the sixth employee in the company, but they dedicate 3 years of their life, they maybe get some bonuses here and there, but once they sell the company, they've basically got very little to show for it, and then the founders, who obviously did put a lot of sweat into it, have then kind of taken everything and walked away. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for you on that. We don't necessarily get to see behind the curtain, as it were, with a lot of these startups and the equity they are offering those early employees. I think usually when a company hits about 10 to 15 people, we see them be funded by venture capitalists. And so maybe where the innovation is coming in is we see another number of venture capitalists put in the term sheet, you need to have a diverse board, you need to have a diverse a hiring plan that promotes diversity, and you need to commit to it as a founder. That doesn't necessarily translate to ownership and stock equity for those early employees, but it does mean that the founders are hiring a more diverse set of employees than they necessarily would have previously. And I know the Clean Energy Venture Group does encourage that in the startups they invest in and others. And it's something where the investor community has really driven the founders to think more about it. It is something we talk a lot about at Greentown, both to encourage our founders to think about it, but because they need to have a workforce that appeals to the investor community as well. And so it's something that's increasingly important and will drive change in the ecosystem.
I'm trying to think, maybe one of the last couple of questions here. Perhaps, what do you think can be steps that kind of again, back on the education side of things, that universities can take or individuals for themselves can take to try to prep themselves more to be, whether they are looking to be a founder in this space and they don't know what to do, or whether they just want to work in the space? What are some of the big areas of learning that people should focus on? And then maybe if you know of any universities doing specific programs to help people kind of launch into these things.
Yeah, I'll start with the early employee. It's almost an easier question to answer. I think understanding the market and the changes that are afoot will really help you make good decisions about companies you would join as an employee. There are good markets are kind of like a rising tide. They'll lift all boats. They will give a lot of opportunities to the employee. And if you understand the market and how it's changing, you can kind of play venture capitalist. You can make a bet on companies that are going to do well. And I think just looking at the data, the good time to join a company is between Series A and Series B. There's a good balance of risk, of funding, and of equity an early employee can get. And if you understand kind of the outcomes and where technology is going to be deployed in a market, you can look at a startup and say, look, I'm gonna bet on this one for outsized returns for myself. And as you develop those skills, they will be marketable to other companies, frankly. And so if that one startup doesn't gain traction for whatever reason, your skills will be transferable to another market. And so, and a straightforward example I'd point to is the battery industry. There's a lot of investment going into batteries today. There are technology companies that are working on cathode materials and materials that remove cobalt from the supply chain, and companies that are working on recycling. You can look at these markets and say, where's the capital going? Where are the customers looking to buy things? And you can make an educated guess about what is interesting to you and where you want to build skills and domain expertise. I think that's a straightforward way to think about it as a future employee. The advice is similar for a founder. I think one of the biggest challenges I learned in my early experience was not coming to market with a market-driven premise or approach. Meant I spent 2 years trying to bring something to market that nobody wanted, and it took me that long to look at my team, look at the organization we were building, and say, look, we need to pivot. This is the wrong thing to work on. And that is hard because you've committed yourself to a decision that you've worked on for years. Coming to build a startup with a market-driven thesis means you will raise capital faster. You will build a solution that people want to buy, and the most successful founders we see are ones who really have a premise about where the market's going. What's complicated about climate tech is often people are coming to the world with a new physics, new technology. And when they are in school, they are often thinking or asking the question, is now the right time to start a business? And no matter how cool or how novel or how different your technology is, it's got to be the right time. And part of the process of starting a company is to discover if it's the right time. Luckily today, there are tons of great programs for early founders to engage in that will accelerate that discovery time. iCore is a fantastic program run out of the NSF. It really runs early founders through the paces of learning about how to do customer discovery, about what questions to ask, to identify if your company is financeable. And then there are a lot of other programs that will take a company through the development stages that they will have to do on their own. And those programs create a lot of structure. And those are just traditional accelerators. Those things didn't exist 10 years ago. And a lot of them do target and support founders as they're coming out of academia or coming out of a national lab program. I think for folks who are coming from a different perspective, who are more in an MBA program, who are thinking about joining a company, again, that market premise based approach will do well for them. And being in an academic program, they have the opportunity to go out and identify technologists within a school who might be working on something interesting. And that's one of the best places to try and spin out and license the technology, because you'll be able to work with the inventor, able to work with the technology office, and can really put together a team that's going to win in the market. So that would be my feedback, is learn about the markets early. That'll do a founder well.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. This reminds me of a book one of my mentors recommended to me a long time ago called The Mom Test. It's obviously pretty relevant for software companies, but I think generally for startups, it's very good book, The Mom Test. I forget who wrote that. But anyways, I think this has been great. I'm really fascinated by everything you guys are doing. I'm super fascinated by the space and how there's so many new things that have to happen, and we need accelerators and incubators to get these through, to make these things that maybe don't have wings yet, to give them kind of the space and the rope to have the failures, but yet still ultimately get off the runway. So any final thoughts or closing items that you want to mention?
No, I think Greentown is always looking to work with great entrepreneurs. If you know someone who is in that sweet spot where they're really ready to bring a product to market and need a place to work and build and want to be part of a community, would love to talk to them, even if it's just a matter of learning about what they're working on. I always love meeting other entrepreneurs. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm always open to connect. And if Greentown's not right for someone today, it could be right for a founder tomorrow, and we're happy to just be in touch and see how we can help.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I've loved most about this, is that everybody's very, very open to talking and to helping. It seems there's this very deep community, even kind of unofficially, across the climate space. So, but anyways, very good. Thanks so much for taking the time, Jason. Really appreciate this, and looking forward to seeing what you guys continue to do.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We really appreciate any thoughts or comments that you have on the show. Please reach out. You can please, of course, share this with somebody who might find it interesting. Perhaps you know somebody starting their CleanTech startup, their ClimateTech startup, really needing a lot of the support that Greentown can offer. You can share with them. And then, of course, please consider reaching out to Jason on LinkedIn to learn more about what they're doing at Greentown Labs directly from them. And then, of course, if you're joining us for the first time, we always ask that you please subscribe and turn on notifications to be made aware of future episodes. And yeah, please, one last thing was really, really helpful. It's kind of under recognized is how important it is for us to get reviews to help spread the word about the podcast. So any reviews on your listening platform are greatly appreciated. If you also are interested to become a sponsor, feel free to reach out. Whether you want to be a sponsor or collaborate in some way, potentially create partnership, please reach out to me. My email can be found in the description. And then if you are interested in getting more involved in the climate tech space, you could consider joining our Slack channel to connect with other professionals there and then interact. Of course, you can do that also with our LinkedIn page where we post every week, and there's a lot of people who are kind of connecting there, and I think it's a good way to just be in touch with other parts of the community. Just a quick note, our next episode will be with Miriam Awara, who is the COO of Pulsinics Inc. They, generally speaking, it's a super interesting conversation, but they have an IoT device that essentially allows electrochemical processes to significantly reduce expenses. So we primarily focused on the green hydrogen application of their technology, but kind of a high-level overview is this technology creates the ability to monitor the machinery as it's operating and identify issues quite early, rather than waiting 6 months to find out something is broken and then having long period times, wait times to get the parts necessary. So it's a really interesting IoT device that can significantly reduce the cost of creating green hydrogen. So a really interesting episode coming up next. Please do tune in for that. And as always, thank you so much for listening to CleanTechies the Podcast, and we will see you next time.